Hello, Father Murr. Robert Moynihan here.
Dr.
And
Moynihan, good afternoon to you, sir.
it's January 29th, Father Murr, Wednesday. We're back together again. And watching that, you're in Spain. I'm actually in an office in Virginia, in Front Royal, Virginia. This is the location of Christendom College, and we're not too far from Washington here. And I spent all fall in Rome. I was present at the Synod in October, at the creation of new cardinals in early December, and at Christmas I was present in Rome. But I was coming here in America to see this new regime of Donald Trump and the passing of the old regime of Joseph Biden. We're kind of at a hinge point in history, and I was thinking as we went through the covers of the magazine in this introduction that we run every time, and we said the popes of our time was one of the covers, and John Paul, Feed My Lambs was a cover. That was the first cover back in 1993. I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that we would be wondering whether these men were holy, whether they were popes, whether they were manipulated by dark forces or had been gone over to the dark side. But there are people now among the podcasters in the Catholic world and outside of the Catholic world who say that the entire institutional church has been deviated and that we now can't trust the Holy See, we can't trust the Vatican, we can't certainly trust the kind of left-leaning pontiff who's now succeeded Pope Benedict here for 11 years. And I've been attempting with all my strength and mental power to try to come to a clear and Catholic position on these matters. Do you think we are in a crisis, Father? And do you think you have clarity on these matters?
Do I think we're in a crisis? Let me answer that one first. Absolutely, yes. There's no question about it. As a matter of fact, I would question anyone's eyesight, earsight, intelligence who would say we're not in a crisis. We are absolutely in a crisis. There's no question about it. What is it being caused by? There we've got fodder for 3 more programs.
Okay.
There's a proximate cause and there's a remote cause, or I should say remote causes and proximate causes. Mm-hmm. But one of the most pressing, obvious, proximate causes is the synodality, is the question of synodality. Because a lot of people who are contacting me, and believe me, I get, as you do, I get hundreds of letters every week, seriously. And everyone is talking about, some have talked about the new religion. They've talked about synodality as the new church, the synodal church, a new religion. And, to try to keep people within the boundaries of reason, I think, without jumping out of the boat, a little bit, put some calm in the situation. I see what they're saying. And the only thing that I can say is this, and I've listened to, as you have, Robert, you've listened to reasons on both sides. And if there's a third and fourth side, we've listened to all of those for years, for over a decade now. The only thing I can tell people is what I believe. And I believe, stay in the boat. Stay in the boat. Wait. We're in a storm. The tempest passes. We'll be able to look at things a little bit more reasonably and with calm and see where we are. I don't think you can't make any decisions right now. And I really hate to, I try not to condemn. I try not to. Sometimes I fall into that myself because some things are just so incredibly obvious. But try not to. I think that if people are worried about what's happening right now, and they really do, a lot of them, and it's a growing number, are talking about a new church, a new religion being born.
Okay.
That will be taken care of in a future date. It'll be dealt with. As I've told you, and you know this before, as I've told our listeners, every situation that's come up in the church and every crisis has been answered at a later date. Usually not when it's happening. The dust has to settle a little bit, and then it's dealt with in a very serious way. Most of the times through councils who deal with all of the actual problems that have come up, and they give answers to a lot of the questions. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, Father Murr, we have Katie Barron watching us. We have about 100 people watching right now live. Thanks to all of you. And if you please would consider hitting the like button, that would be helpful to us. And Katie Barron says, correct. So she agrees with your father. Do not trust any of them. I am happy the Catholic Church has been defunded by the new administration in the United States. The Catholic Church had received all sorts of financial support by the Biden regime, and Trump issued an executive order blocking some of that regarding in one way regarding the immigration crisis. Maybe the bishops will now try to save the Catholic Church in America. So, Father Murr, we originally came together over the friendship you had, a profound friendship with Cardinal Ganon, Edouard Gagnon from Canada, who died in 2007. I also had met him and become an acquaintance.
Well, you were there. You were there just a few days before he died. You went to visit him in Montreal.
Yeah. And that became a hinge point. There's quite a few hinge points, but he became a hinge point for our friendship. And what he did in particular was get involved in two investigations. One was of the influences in the Roman Curia that were sort of not orthodox. They were prompted by external forces. He was trying to do a kind of survey of the penetration of the Vatican by Freemasonry. And he wrote a report, and you knew him during the years in the 1970s when he was doing that research. And somehow that report has always remained secret. And one of our repeated refrains was, please, Holy Father, please, Vatican administration, after so many, almost 50 years now.
It's almost 50 years, yeah.
Release the Gagnon report, almost like people were asking Trump to release the John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King intelligence reports, sort of classified information. And I think we still believe that that should be done. And
I would love to see that done, Robert. I would love to see that done. I've asked the Holy Father and the Vatican on many programs. I don't know if they're watching or listening, but I've asked them many times for that to be released. It would be marvelous, because it would show that first of all, that there was and is a problem with Freemasonry, and not just Freemasonry. It's modernism. Let me just make a commercial break here for modernism. Pope Pius X wrote a great encyclical against modernism, but the definition that he gave to it is very simple, and at the same time, very all-inclusive. The definition is that modernism is the synthesis of all heresies. Every heresy in 2,000 years belongs to modernism. Marxism is a heresy that belongs to modernism. Gnosticism is. Freemasonry is. All of them in one bunch all together collectively is called modernism. That is where we are right now. That is where we are right now. And Freemasonry is part of it. That it has many parts, but it's all, if you will, and this is a generalization, this is painting with a very wide brush. It is all leftism. It is all liberalism in the European sense of liberalism, in a not good sense of liberalism. Let me put it that way.
Mhm.
And I would ask again that they release Gagnon's report. I know that he gave two of those reports to two different popes, John Paul I and John Paul II. I was there. But he also left one report, a complete report of his. He left it to Cardinal Oddi in the Congregation for the Clergy. And I think, as you will remember, Robert, it was stolen from the from the caja fuerte. What do you call that? The strong box or the safe.
Yeah, the safe.
A huge safe from the Congregation of Clergy was stolen from there. So I don't know, but I do know that the two popes had that report. Anyway, I'm going the long way about this. Again, I would ask the Holy Father and the Holy See to release those reports. I think they'd be most telling.
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is to sort of underline that we're not simply raising issues wildly, let's say. We're actually quite reasonable. And
Actually, we're more than reasonable. We're calm, collective, cool.
And yet, over the years, there have been people who have attacked the church, tried to deviate the church, tried to persuade the church in a way that temptation that Christ passed through when the devil appeared to him after 40 days of fasting on the high mountain and said, I have three things that I'd like to ask you, or I'd like to give to you. I'd like to give you control of all the kingdoms of the earth. And he says, no, that is belonging to God alone. And but that right there has always told us the temptation to worldly power. My kingdom.
Actually, Robert, permit me to just correct slightly.
Sure, go ahead.
And it's a funny sort of correction, because the devil, when he offered Christ all temporal power in the world, he said, I possess all of these governments. They're mine.
Yeah.
You can have them all. At Fulton J. Sheen, God love him, said this was the first time in recorded history that the devil actually spoke the truth.
Yeah.
Anyways,
no, that's, yeah. So those temptations offered to Christ, which he rejected and went on to his passion. And then, as we believe, he reigned from the tree. He became the ruler, the king, the eternal king, because he passed through the passion, didn't accept the temptations of the devil. And his eternal kingship, it remains in 2025. But throughout these 2,000 years, there's temptations that his mystical body faces. The mystical body is the church. He's risen. His mystical body is present in the world. But there are empires, there are Roman emperors, there are German emperors, there are capitalist captains of industry who want the church to go along with their plans for the future of the world. They could be the Fabian Society founded in 1884 in England, that had a vision of humanity developing in a progressive way, and thought that over time they would domesticate or eliminate the Catholic Church and really the Christian faith in general. So when we talk about the threats that we see and the confusion that emerges from the Vatican, it's in this larger context that the representatives of Christ and the members of his body are going to be tempted, and by a very supernatural power, the highest power, the devil, and the minions of the devil. I think there's a prayer that we say dedicated to Saint Michael, where we ask him to defend us in this battle, as the devil prowls about the world seeking the ruin of souls. And of course, the highest of all these temptations now is this new view of man being brought forward by this new artificial intelligence, which is now taking nuclear power plants worth of energy for an entire city to run into these computers to crank out all the data of all of our thoughts, all of our genetic code, and have total authority over the human future. And it will be part of a kind of algorithm. And the Vatican just today announced that they are weighing in on what would be the ethical parameters of artificial intelligence. So, and even our administration in America is putting $500 billion into a new artificial intelligence program that will be able to partially be sponsored by the government itself. And the Chinese just came out with this new artificial, right now the name of it's slipping my mind, but they proposed it, and the stock market sharply plummeted because they developed an artificial intelligence imitation of ChatGPT, which was announced on Monday, and because they had done it at about 10% of the cost of what NVIDIA and these other companies and Google are doing. So it sounds like I'm raving here a bit out of context, and yet these worldly powers and the development of the human prospect inevitably confront the proposal and the message of Jesus Christ, and which is supposed
to. You're right. You're right. You're right. Let me ask you a question. When have they ever been victorious? When have they ever won?
We've had many wars. The popes were opposed to some of these wars. They've had many injustices in the development of society. A lot of people have been crushed. They've made different laws with regard to things like abortion. But
I mean, Robert, the promises that they make. When have those promises been fulfilled? I'm remembering, for example, the last major time that I remember a prophecy being made by the secular was with Margaret Sanger on the Negro project that she had, right? Which was to eliminate unwanted blacks from American society. This is insanity. Yet she founded Planned Parenthood. That failed, but that was her plan. That failed. Jumping over to artificial intelligence, I don't know what does it promise. This is going to be the remedy for all human ailments?
Well,
everything that's wrong with us is going to be taken care of by artificial intelligence? Well, no. That's not going to work.
Okay, I do have to say that
and Hitler in the Reich was going on for 1,000 years and everything. None of these things really come to fruition, and especially when they oppose the will of God, especially when they are directly in opposition to the will of God. I haven't seen any of those promises fulfilled.
Well, it is often taught that we will pass through a passion that will be great suffering. So even if they don't make it, they're going to try. Do you hear me?
Sure, they'll try, but that's my whole point. They have tried since the beginning of time.
Yeah, someone here.
Have they succeeded? That's all I'm saying.
CW sort of agrees with what I tried haltingly to express. The promises, you're right, Father, the promises don't come to fruition, but they do incalculable damage in the trying.
So, undoubtedly, nobody's questioning that. But they never produce what they set out to produce. They never fulfill their promises, and that should be a lesson in itself. But it isn't.
Okay.
But it isn't.
Palermo Trapani. And again, or Trapani. Palermo is the leading city in Sicily, famous. It's on the northern coast there of Sicily, and Trapani are some islands off that coast. So,
And you know why it's called Palermo?
no, Father, no.
Let me tell you. It's because it's one of the few things I know. I love throwing in trivia. Palermo was so named because when the pilgrims from the Crusades and all of the pilgrimages to the Holy Land returned to Europe, Palermo was one of the first stops on the way back into Western civilization. And it is there that they deposited their palms, because they all brought palms back from the Holy Land as a symbol of their pilgrimage, and they deposited them there. And that is Palermo.
Well,
Palma de Mallorca was another such place. There were different places all called palms for that reason. Many of them for that reason, I should say, not all of them.
all right.
Some are called Palm City because it's a name, that's all. But most of them, especially the old ones like Palermo, have that as a reason.
Okay, and this is a beautiful thought that people were traveling to Jerusalem and returning and recalling the Passion of Christ. Palermo Trapani says, I agree, but Christ in the boat, Mark 4:35-41, still holds true. Christ is guiding the boat through the storm with the waters crashing in, but it still goes through the storm. And I guess that's your message, isn't it, Father? Stay with the boat.
I absolutely believe that. I
All right.
absolutely believe that because for two reasons. Because Christ is Christ and the boat is the boat. The boat is the boat is the church, and Christ founded the church. He's not going to abandon it. Neither should we. That's all.
Okay. So Laura, thank you, Laura, for commenting. Appreciate you watching. Laura writes, the Passion will be Holy Eucharist in darkness. Now, that's a kind of poetic, very sensitive remark. I'm not sure what it means. The Passion will be Holy Eucharist in darkness. Can you really reflect on that, Father?
I can't. I don't understand. I'm not understanding. I think I don't want to guess at what she's trying to say. I don't know.
Well, I think she's saying perhaps the Holy Eucharist will be hidden, won't be public anymore.
Well, we're just about there now. We're certainly going in that direction.
Okay. And the reason that I bring all these things up is that I'm very much involved, as I think every day. I do have thoughts daily, Father.
I know people won't believe that, but I believe you.
Okay. And the thought I have is what could I possibly write, or what could I research, or what could we do on the podcast that would help the situation? And the situation is, therefore, the first question, what is the situation? And part of it is relating to Ganon. And Ganon was asked by the Pope, let's find out who has infiltrated the Vatican. And then his report has never been released. So that's the first thing I often come back to. And that's the reason why I went to see him as he lay dying. I was thinking maybe he's kept one last copy in his briefcase and he'll hand it to me. No, but so I think it must exist in the archives. I've now got an archive pass.
Well, there are two places that he gave it to. He gave it to John Paul I, and he gave it to John Paul II. He gave it to Paul VI, but Paul VI gave it back to him. So there are for sure two copies in the Vatican. There was a third that was stolen from the safe at the Congregation for the Clergy. People, when I tell them that, they don't believe me. I said, well, yes, it's true. I read it in the Osservatore Romano, in the Vatican's own newspaper.
Yeah,
they played it down. There was only one or two stories about it, and they were on page 18 or whatever it was. I'm exaggerating, but it was not a big deal, and nobody made a big deal out of it. I thought it was a huge deal, but
I can try to bring up a story about it if I can find it right now, or if one of our viewers could help us. It was in the 1970s. let's say the
Yes.
theft of the Ganon report. Let's see if something comes up. Oh, that's my article comes up, a dying cardinal, and my murder in the 33rd degree comes up. That's your book. But
I know that book. Yes.
so, well, I can't find it right now.
But there's
I,
there's nothing, right? I looked for it myself on the internet, and I could find there's no record of that any longer. It's not even on the internet.
okay, I looked at it 5 years ago, and I just sent you an old email of us talking to each other 5 years ago, and then it was still available, and I was studying it at the time, and there was a report that the safe of the office of the clergy was in Italian press, was broken into, documents were stolen, and
But I think, Robert, that was right. That was right as my book was coming out.
right, it was just before, yes.
After my book came out, I can't find it any longer.
Okay, that's fascinating. So they've actually scrubbed the internet of certain historical information. Okay, so that is actually our predicament. We're trying to go back through, and I also called up the document you mentioned of Pope Pius X, Pascendi Dominici Gregis. And this was on what's the date of this? It was 1907. It's a long document, and I put a link to it on the chat. And he's saying what the pastor of the flock of the Lord has to do in order to keep the flock safe. And what he refers to is wolves, Father Murr, wolves.
Pascendi. Pascendi is an encyclical. It is very long, and it is in depth, and it is not light reading. Let me just caution the readers. It's a little bit heavy. You have to dedicate. You don't just read it. You have to almost study it. It is brilliant, very well written. Cardinal Murr del Val had a hand in that, certainly, but it is Pius X's own preoccupations, his own worries with the state of things, and what we're going through today. If you read Pascendi, if you read it through, you'll see that what we're going through today is exactly, not more or less, it is exactly what Pope Pius X was trying to prevent, was exactly what's happening today.
Well,
So
Father,
it's prophetic.
yeah, I can bring that up onto the screen
prophetic.
and just look at one or two paragraphs. But actually, Katie, our producer, I wonder if you could show a video of what it means to travel to see Father Murr, because we'd like to invite people to travel with us on a retreat in the fall, or maybe the following spring. But first we want to fill up the fall pilgrimage. And Father meets with us. We visit him where he's sitting there at his desk in southern Spain, and
In the green room.
the green room. And yeah, I've sat in that chair, Father, when I visited
You
this
have.
fall.
You have indeed.
Yeah, we were there in October, and of course, when we came, there were torrential rains. And
Well, Robert, right now, the rain is incredible. It started about 10 days ago and has not let up. I'm not complaining, because when I got here 3 years ago, we were in a severe drought. Spain was. So all water is welcome, but it gets to be after day 9, it becomes a little bit depressing.
Okay, but you're still always filled with good humor. And so, Katie, could you show the video of what it's like to go on pilgrimage to southern Spain and a retreat with Father Murr?
Come with us on a unique pilgrimage and retreat to renew your spirit. Experience the beauty and richness of southern Spain. Our retreat master, Father Charles T. Murr, a renowned Catholic priest, best-selling author, philosopher, theologian, trained psychologist, and pastor of souls. Father Murr will guide us through 3 mornings of spiritual reflections at a convent located in the historic heart of Carmona, Spain, promising a transformative journey. Experience an intimate evening with Father Murr at his home. Wine, dinner, music, and conversation, a highlight of this unique experience. Explore picturesque towns in Andalusia, each with its own history and charm. From the ancient streets of Carmona to the majestic beauty of Cordoba, the breathtaking views of Ronda, the remarkable village of Centenil, and the historic wonders of Seville, our pilgrimage will be filled with awe-inspiring moments. Join us on this profound spiritual journey and rediscover the joy of faith, fellowship, and renewal. Book your place now and embark on a pilgrimage and retreat unlike any other.
Well, there you go. There you go, Father Murr.
There you go, and there you have it. Yes.
All right. I'm looking forward to coming back to seeing you again. And of course,
Well, we're looking forward to having you back. The two groups that have been here in the past, I was just telling you before the program began, what marvelous people, all of them. Usually in a group of anybody, you've always got some complainers or something negative. It was amazing. Very positive, upbeat people looking to better their spiritual lives. And I hope I wasn't an obstacle to that noble end. We were trying our best to help that. But just marvelous people. And also the staff that you have, Robert, with putting everything together and executing everything was fantastic. The tours that you make during the day to Granada, to Cordoba, beautiful. Everything programmed beautifully. And you had just enough of everything. Let me just put it that way. It was in one day. Nothing was overdone. It was well programmed and
well, we're going on now on the bread and water diet, Father Murr. We'll be having bread and water only on the next pilgrimage.
Well, I'm going to be having just water. I see myself in those pictures and I'm going, my God, who is that fat man?
Oh, man. Okay, well, I think what people would like to see, in addition to southern Spain and visiting you and having a few days to take sort of out of time and space, it all feels like 500 or 700 years ago when you go into Seville and the vast plains there of southern Spain. And then your kind of 700-year-old spiritual voice yourself.
Thank you for that, Robert. I'll bring my cane. Give it more authenticity.
I thought I would share my screen. May I bring in this document just for a moment? This, I think, will be fascinating. Now, do you see that? Okay. So I'm going to take this to the top. I only have one screen. Now, everyone tells me I need a second screen so I can shift between looking at you. Right now, I'm looking at the document on my screen. Right. And this is Pius X, Pope Pius X. Yeah. And he's writing in 1907, which is the same year that Robert Hugh Benson wrote the book, Lord of the World. And so they already knew then that the kind of modernist mind, which was developing telegraphs and bombs and airplanes were just beginning, was going to propose a kind of new world order. So even 120 years later, this is still very relevant. Don't you agree, Father?
Absolutely. It is we are living what this predicted.
Okay. So he says the gravity of the situation, 1907, so that we make no delay in explaining the situation, is rendered necessary, especially by the fact the partisans of error are to be sought not only among the church's open enemies, they lie hid, a thing to be deeply deplored and feared in her very bosom, bosom and heart, and are the more mischievous, the less conspicuously they appear. So we hate to have a kind of defensive and how could we call it? A suspicious attitude, and but if we confront it with a kind of open suspicion, it's not closed. And if we say, look, we know that there will be a tendency of people, even in the church, to start to have this kind of desire for modern pleasures and modern doctrines, and therefore we're actually simply taking account of reality, right?
Yes.
I think that's the point.
I'm just reading ahead where you stopped. We allude, venerable brethren, to many who belong to the Catholic laity, nay, and it is far more lamentable, to the ranks of the priesthood itself, who hinge a love for the church, lacking the firm protection of philosophy and theology, nay more, thoroughly imbued with the poisonous doctrines taught by the enemies of the church, and lost to all sense of modesty, bought themselves as reformers of the church, and forming more boldly into line of attack, assail all that is most sacred in the work of Christ, not sparing even the person of the divine Redeemer, whom, with sacrilegious daring, they reduce to a simple, mere man.
There you go.
Look, I mean, this goes. You have to study it.
Yeah.
We would be doing it a disservice to go into it more here, but it is worth. It certainly it should be required reading by every Catholic today to see what the.
I'm not gonna take 3 hours. I'm gonna take 3 more minutes. Okay, Father.
All right.
Analysis of modernist teaching to proceed. So this is the encyclical on modernism. This is it, and it's not being sort of a kind of renegade, rad trad Catholic. It is totally directly from the pen of the pontiff himself, Pius X, who was a very pleasant man, who came from northern Italy, and he was known for his being affable
And a saint.
and canonized a saint. So it's not wrong of us to read his writing and say, what did the Pope 120 years ago warn us against? And he said, to proceed in an orderly manner in this subject, it must first of all be noted that every modernist sustains and comprises within himself many personalities. He is a philosopher, a believer, a theologian, a historian, a critic, an apologist, a reformer. So the modernists may be Catholic believers, theologians, historians, but somehow altering slightly the doctrines of our faith. And then he goes through agnosticism, and he talks about how they've lost faith. These he goes again, this agnosticism is only the negative part of the system of the modernists. It is positive side consists of what they call vital immanence. And they're looking at some force. They might call it the force that drives life forward, not God, not Christ, but some type of natural force. And then the consequence is the deformation of religious history, and he explains that. Then he explains the origin of dogmas, why we have very specific dogmas in the church. And then we talk about the history, the intrinsic evolution of dogma. Well, this is the attack on dogmas, okay? And we are still getting this today. This is not changed.
Still getting it today. We are getting it today in spades, as the old poker players used to say.
And in fact, this is where synodality comes in right here, Father. Synodality is designed, or it opens itself. Let's say, supposedly, I can imagine it could be a good synodality. I can imagine, but it is easily open to distortion. Therefore, listening to people who will change the dogmas. That's what the dogmas. Okay, so Pius X says the modernist argues it is quite impossible to maintain that dogmas express absolute truth. For insofar as they are symbols, they are images of truth, and so they must be adapted to the religious.
Everything is vague. It's all vague. It's what would you like it to mean? That's right. What would you what does this mean to you? How many times I heard that when we were being educated?
Yeah.
What is this saying to you? What do you see? Yeah.
So, and then
that's fine, but you've also the subjectivity is one thing, but it's part of it. Objectivity is the other part of it, and that's what's most important.
Yeah. So the modernists completely invert the parts. Science is a project of the human mind, but they make science into a god. The methods of the modernists. And
There you go. But Robert, you're going to get lost here
I
because this
know.
goes on and on and on, and it really has to be read slowly and studied and thought out.
Okay, and I'm just going to go to the end then. And people, I know that maybe just a handful of you will take a look at this document, but I use it as a cornerstone
It's
to
worth the
say,
while.
well,
It's
what we
worth the
have is
while.
a papal basis, and all the Vatican officials know this. Of course, they know this, but we start really to understand the 20th century with the Pope at the beginning of the 20th century. We were born ourselves in the middle of this century, 50 years after this document. And now 60 years or more, 70 years have gone by, and the danger has simply increased. And this is where he says modernism and all the heresies. He says modernism is a synthesis of all the heresies. And it just means that we can change things. And he tries to explain. And what we want to defend is the unchangeable nature of the truth and of the faith. And we come to the very end, and he talks about specific things he wants to do here, practical application, episcopal vigilance over publications. He's trying to give a series of steps to stop this from winning. And then he says censorship, starting. Let's not let certain things be published. He talks about priests as editors. We got quite a few priests as editors of things. He's talking about congresses. And congresses and public gatherings are used by the modernists to propagate and defend their opinions. So he says, in the future, bishops shall not permit congresses of priests except on very rare occasions. So diocesan watch committees, he says. This was a pope who tried to set up defensive barriers around the church to protect the church. And this document was given at Rome, St. Peter's, Rome, on the 8th day of September. So, the great feast, 1907, the 5th year of on pontificate Pius X. Okay, and so after him came Benedict the 15th, the First World War. Then came Pius the 11th. Then came Pius the 12th. Then came John the 23rd, and the whole popes of our own time. Paul VI, whom you met, John Paul I, about whom you wrote a book, and John Paul II, whom all of us have watched and knew. And I personally met him several times. Benedict the 16th, whom I also met many times, and now Francis. So what would we do today to try to begin to set up barriers and defensive lines around the church to defend the church, except beyond this podcast, Father Murr?
I don't know. Well, I do know. I do know.
You do know.
Yes, I do know. You would need a pontiff who wants that. That's what you'd need.
Okay, so what do we have?
You're not going to get me in trouble that way, Robert.
Well, okay, so I would also say, don't you often remind me, I think, that the devil likes not so much to tell absolute falsehoods blatantly and obvious. He likes to tell things that are about 1% false or 2% false. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of truth in it. We got to love our neighbor. We've got to, help the sinner. Those are all. But then to just bless sort of indiscriminately without any further remark is the error, because you still need to say, go and sin no more. In other words, the true fullness of Jesus's teaching has to be preached. And there's always a temptation to stop short of that. And that temptation has been yielded to by many of the hierarchy, because it's very hard to follow the path of Christ.
Can't we all just get along? Remember that remark
I do.
by Rodney King? Why can't we all just get
Oh,
along?
explain that. Some people
And
won't.
this is theologically what we've been doing for years. Oh, don't get bogged down with that. Don't listen to this. Let's just get along. Let's make life easier for everyone. That's not the message of Christ. Christ did not come, in a sense, he did come to make life easier for all of us, much easier. However, that much easier is not accepted by the world as much easier.
Well, it's the narrow gate.
That's right. That's right.
But
But
first,
Christ
Rodney-
came to deliver happiness, that we all be in a state of happiness by being his followers and by being guaranteed the right to entry into heaven. This is happiness. This is what Christ came to bring. A peace. When we talk about the peace of the Lord being with you, there's a peace that only Christ can give. No one else gives it, and the world certainly doesn't give it. But it also costs something. You have to, if you believe in Christ, you have to follow Christ. You have to follow everything that Christ is saying, or really be trying to. I don't think anyone has ever accomplished it perfectly, besides the Blessed Virgin Mary. But because we all fail, because we're all human, we understand that. But we also know how to get up, say I'm sorry, dust ourselves off, and get back into the race. There are parts of that are what you're alluding to, Robert, is this: the idea of reforming, of changing our lives, of confessing and being forgiven, and then repenting and going out changed men and women, children, to live a life closer to Christ. That seems to be missing. That seems to be missing. You hear this when people are saying to you that God loves you just as you are, right where you are. Yes, and then what? Where's the rest of that? Yes, you're right. He does love me where I am, how I am, and he wants me to be better. He wants me to be better. He wants me to grow. Growing is part of who I am. It's also who I am here. It's also my soul, my heart. Everything is growth. I'm to get better, not just stay where I am. I remember I told you many times that I worked with Courage in New York. And anybody who came into Courage, usually the young men who were there were about 50 in that group. Fantastic people, really fantastic people. They admitted that the way they were living was wrong.
You should explain.
And they wanted to be at peace.
You should explain what courage is.
Courage is basically same-sex attracted people, men or women. In the case of that I'm talking about concretely, we had many more men who wanted to leave that lifestyle. They'd got sucked into the whole lifestyle to the expression of the homosexual lifestyle. They wanted out. They wanted out of that lifestyle. So they built groups all over. They were all over the United States and Canada, so also in Europe, to help each other get out of that lifestyle. They were fantastic. I mean, they were fantastic. Their spiritual lives were models. They were models of spiritual lives and of real, true sanctity, of living saints. I mean that. I was impressed by their routine. Daily mass, rosary. They would get together to pray divine office and socialize, but everything toward the idea of repentance and change in life. The idea of go sin no more. Christ didn't just say, okay, now you're cured, now go. He said, no, go sin no more. That aspect is missing.
Okay.
Now, you're right when you say, did God love them just the way they were, where they were? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. and he wanted them to get closer.
So
Just like he wants you to get closer to him and me to get closer to him,
Yes,
always
but-
closer.
But in those words you just spoke, you weren't just speaking to me, you were speaking to the leadership of the Vatican and to Pope Francis. You were saying you are right that God loves them.
Yes.
But yeah, so say it again.
But also, Robert, it dovetails into what you were saying. You're wrong when you only tell a percentage of the truth and you don't finish it. That's wrong. And that is a major problem today. Only part of the truth, the pretty part of the truth, the part that doesn't hurt, the part that doesn't require too much of me. That let's talk about that, and not what's required of me to change, to become more Christ-like, and to be more pleasing to God. Let's not talk about that. You can't do that. It's not working. And I think the what proves that it's not working is the incredible loss. It's lamentable, the loss of so many souls. We have lost so many practicing Catholics. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just amazing. Families that were for generations Catholic. Maybe one or two people still attend Mass sometimes. Nobody's living a sacramental life. Confessions are done. This is by their fruits you shall know them. Well, if that's the way it goes, we're not doing too well. We're going the wrong direction. I think anybody can see that, and that's why. I don't want to get into the whole thing right now. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit later next week.
Okay.
The revolution that is happening in the world right now, since a particular man got elected as president of the United States. I'd like to talk about that next week. We really should, because there's a revolution, Robert, that's happening right now, a revolution of common sense. Common sense seems to be returning. And boy, could the Catholic Church use common sense. We're missing out on that also. The whole world has been missing out on common sense for, 2 or 3 decades, intensified during the last decade, wokeness and what have you. But it's now, I see even people who are not on board with anything saying, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. And the good thing about that, Robert, is that we've had time to do the nonsense. We've had time to be practicing what does not make sense and does not work.
Yeah.
We've seen that for 10, 20, 30 years. It doesn't make sense and it doesn't work. Well, finally, we've decided, well, let's stop going in that direction. Why don't we try another direction? Let's take things that do make sense and see if they do work. This is refreshing. And this is where we're going, not only in the United States of America. The entire world is most of the governments of the world are beginning to understand this and implement it, this common sense. It would be so marvelous. It would be a grace of God if the Catholic Church also followed suit and started dealing with a lot of things common sensely. Is that a word, common sensely? if it isn't, I'll coin it. There you go.
There you go.
Anyway, listen, right now,
That's
I have to go because I've got another interview coming up. But let's talk about that next week, Robert. Let's talk about this, because there is a revolution happening in the world, and it's a marvelous one. It's really a marvelous one. I'd like to get us on board with that revolution. It would be marvelous to see things change a little bit in the name of common sense. What did G.K. Chesterton say? That the only thing wrong with common sense was that it wasn't so common.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's going to be made more common, and I'd love to see our church be on that bandwagon.
All right. Well, we'll get back together next week, Father Murr. Thank you to everybody. A blessing, maybe, Father. Give us your blessing and we'll depart.
Absolutely. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. God bless, Robert, and thank you to all of our audience, and especially thank the audience for their prayers. Every time people write me, they promise me prayers. I promise them back. I thank you very much for all of those. I need them. I really do. Robert, God bless. We'll see you next week. Same time, same station.
Amen.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.